On a sweltering summer afternoon in the heart of a small southern town, the air buzzed with the kind of tension only those who have lived it could truly understand. In the parking lot of a local gas station, a black woman named Maya Carter stood calmly, her dark curls framing a face etched with grace and quiet strength. Maya was the kind of person who carried herself with unshakable confidence. Though she rarely sought the spotlight, she was a professional, a leader, and a woman of immense influence. But none of that was apparent at first glance. As Maya reached for her purse to retrieve her ID, the sound of heavy boots crunching against gravel approached her. Officer Daniels, a man with a stern jawline and eyes that seemed to search for trouble where there was none, had been patrolling this area for years. Known for his rigid demeanor and questionable tactics, his reputation preceded him. He believed in authority above all else, and he wore his badge like a crown. To him, today was no different, a routine stop, a chance to assert control. Daniel's sharp voice cut through the humid air. "License and ID," he demanded, his tone leaving no room for questions. Maya, unflinching, handed over her identification with a polite smile. But it was clear from the start that Daniels wasn't looking for cooperation. He was looking for submission. He examined the ID briefly before something shifted in his expression, a flicker of disdain, a silent judgment he didn't bother to conceal. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" he asked, his words laced with suspicion. Maya remained composed. "Just heading home," she replied simply, her voice even and calm. She wasn't one to let someone else's aggression dictate her energy. But Daniels wasn't satisfied. He looked her over, as though her very existence was an offense, before a smirk curled at the edge of his lips. Without warning, he took her ID, held it up, and pulled out his lighter. The flame flickered for a brief moment before it met the edge of the plastic card. Maya watched in stunned silence as the ID began to curl and darken under the heat, disbelief washing over her like a tidal wave. "What are you doing?" she finally exclaimed, her voice steady but tinged with incredulity. Daniels shrugged, as though the act was nothing more than a casual inconvenience. "You won't need it where you're going," he said, his words dripping with arrogance. To him, this was just another power play, a chance to remind someone like Maya, who held the authority in this town. But what Daniels didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly imagined, was the weight of his actions and the ripple effects they would soon unleash. Maya wasn't just any woman. She wasn't someone who would let this slide, nor was she someone who lacked the means to challenge him. As the charred remains of her ID fell to the ground, a flicker of determination sparked in her eyes. Maya wasn't just angry, she was resolute, and though Daniels stood there, smug and self-assured, the wheels of change had already begun to turn, set into motion by his own reckless behavior. This wasn't the end of the encounter. It was merely the beginning of a storm that would reveal truths, challenge perceptions, and leave Officer Daniels questioning everything he thought he knew about power and consequence. Maya stared at the burnt fragments of her ID scattered at her feet, the acrid smell of melted plastic lingering in the air. Her pulse quickened, but her face remained composed. She refused to give Officer Daniels the satisfaction of seeing any fear. But deep inside, anger simmered. Not because of the ID itself, she could replace that, but because of the blatant disrespect, the misuse of power, and the silent message Daniels thought he was sending. Daniels adjusted his belt, the smug look never leaving his face. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" he taunted, leaning in just slightly, as if daring Maya to react. His posture was relaxed, but his hand hovered close to his holster, an unspoken threat hanging in the air. Maya took a slow breath. "You just made a mistake," she said softly, her voice steady, each word deliberate. Daniels chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "The only mistake I see here is you thinking you're above the law." He took a step back, surveying the scene like he had already won whatever game he thought he was playing. But Daniels didn't know Maya Carter. As she watched him swagger back toward his cruiser, she mentally traced the steps that had led to this moment. Maya wasn't from this small town. She had only moved here a few months ago for work, accepting a high-profile position that demanded discretion. Her presence here was supposed to be quiet, under the radar. But the weight her name carried in legal and political circles wasn't something easily hidden. Maya Carter wasn't just any professional. She was a federal civil rights attorney, known for exposing corrupt law enforcement practices and holding officers accountable. Of course, Daniels didn't know that. Yet, Maya's mind spun, recalling stories she had read about small-town officers overstepping boundaries, how power in the wrong hands could erode entire communities. She had built her career on fighting exactly this kind of abuse. But experiencing it firsthand was different. More personal, more infuriating. Still, Maya knew better than to escalate the situation now. She couldn't let emotion dictate her next move. She bent down, calmly picking up the charred pieces of her ID, carefully brushing the soot from her fingers. Her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. Daniels climbed into his cruiser, the engine rumbling to life. He gave Maya one last smirk through the window before pulling away, his tires kicking up dust and loose gravel. Maya stood there for a long moment, watching him disappear down the road. She pulled out her phone, glancing at it briefly. No signal, typical for this side of town. She wasn't surprised. The gas station attendant, a young man who had been watching from behind the glass door, cautiously stepped outside. His name tag read Kyle. He looked nervous, eyes darting to where the cruiser had vanished. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked hesitantly. Maya gave him a tight but polite smile. "I'm fine, thank you." Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "Officer Daniels, he's, known for stuff like that. Folks around here try to stay out of his way." Maya studied the young man. His unease wasn't just about what he had witnessed. It was about the unwritten rules of this town, the quiet agreements to stay silent, to not make waves. "Is that so?" Maya replied thoughtfully. Kyle nodded quickly but said nothing more. He wasn't about to get involved. Maya turned back toward her car, carefully placing the burnt fragments of her ID into a small zippered pouch in her bag. This wasn't the time or place to make a scene, but Daniels had set something in motion that couldn't be undone. Driving away from the gas station, Maya's mind sharpened. She replayed that interaction over and over, analyzing every word, every action. It wasn't just about her ID. This was about power, about control. And if Daniels felt comfortable enough to burn her identification in broad daylight, how many others had been silenced or intimidated when no one was watching? She needed to understand the full picture before making her next move. Maya pulled into a quiet diner a few miles down the road, the kind of place where the locals gathered, where stories circulated over coffee and pie. She stepped inside, the small brass bell above the door jingling. The murmur of quiet conversations dipped for a second as a few heads turned her way. New faces always drew attention in towns like this. Sliding into a corner booth, Maya scanned the room. An older man sat alone near the window, slowly stirring his coffee. Two women behind the counter chatted softly, their eyes flickering toward Maya with curiosity. She wasn't here for small talk, though. She pulled out her phone again. This time, she had a signal. Quickly, she sent a text to a contact she knew would understand the situation's weight. ***, need info on Officer Daniels. Small-town cop, badge number 214. Something feels off. Call me ***. She put the phone down and stared out the window, watching the town move at its slow, sleepy pace. But Maya wasn't here to blend in anymore. She needed to know what kind of man Daniels was, and more importantly, how far his influence reached. A waitress approached, breaking her thoughts. "Can I get you something, honey?" Maya smiled faintly. "Just coffee, thank you." As the waitress walked away, Maya noticed a faded newspaper pinned to the bulletin board by the door. The headline caught her eye. ***, local officer awarded for community service ***. There was Daniels, smiling broadly, shaking hands with the mayor. But something about the photo felt off, the way he smiled, the way the mayor's expression seemed forced. Beneath the headline, a smaller article was barely legible. ***, controversy surrounds police department hiring practices ***. Maya's eyes narrowed. It was subtle, buried under positive stories, but it was there. A history that wasn't entirely clean. Her phone buzzed on the table, snapping her focus back. It was a text reply. **** Daniels has a record. Internal complaints, but nothing sticks. Town protects him. Be careful. ***. Maya exhaled slowly. Daniels wasn't just a road cop. He was protected, insulated by a system designed to shield men like him. But systems like that had cracks, and Maya had spent her entire career learning how to find them. She didn't come here to fight battles, but sometimes battles found you. And Officer Daniels had no idea just how badly he had miscalculated. The diner's hum continued around Maya as she stared at her phone, processing the message. Internal complaints, protected by the town. None of it surprised her, but it confirmed what she had suspected. Officer Daniels wasn't acting alone. He was backed by a system that allowed him to act without fear of consequence. That kind of protection didn't just appear overnight. It was built over years, brick by brick, by people who either shared his views or were too afraid to challenge him. Maya sipped her coffee, eyes scanning the diner. Every glance in her direction now felt heavier, more curious. Word traveled fast in small towns, and it wouldn't take long for people to hear about her run-in with Daniels. She wondered how many people here had their own stories about him. Stories they buried out of fear or exhaustion. But Maya wasn't from here. Fear wasn't going to silence her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet voice. "You should be careful." Maya looked up to see a woman standing beside her booth. She was middle-aged, wearing a faded denim jacket and holding a coffee cup. Her face was lined with worry, but her eyes were sharp. "Excuse me?" Maya replied, cautious but curious. The woman glanced around before leaning in slightly. "Daniels. He doesn't like people asking questions. And if you're not from here, that makes you a problem." Maya tilted her head, studying her. "And who are you?" The woman hesitated. "Name's Carla. Used to be a nurse at the local clinic. I've seen what that man can do." She sipped her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "But people here, they look the other way. Always have." Maya leaned in, lowering her voice. "Why tell me this?" Carla's eyes flicked toward the window, as if making sure no one was listening. "Because you're not like the rest of us. You don't look scared." She paused. "But you should be. Daniels has friends in places you wouldn't expect. He's untouchable here." Maya's grip on her coffee tightened. "No one's untouchable." Carla gave a sad smile. "That's what my brother thought too. Until he went missing." Maya's breath caught. "Your brother?" Carla nodded slowly. "Jason. He was looking into Daniels a few years back. Thought he could expose some of the things going on in the department. Next thing we knew, he was gone. Police called it an accident. Said he drove off the road late at night. But Jason didn't drink. And he never drove that stretch of road." The weight of Carla's words sank in. This wasn't just about Daniels abusing his power during traffic stops. It went deeper. "Why didn't anyone investigate?" Maya asked, though she already suspected the answer. Carla let out a bitter laugh. "Investigated by who?" "Daniels' own department. The sheriff and Daniels are tight. They grew up together. This whole town protects their own, and Daniels is one of them." Maya sat back, the pieces slowly fitting together. It wasn't just about a bad cop, it was about a system built to protect him. The corruption wasn't isolated. It was woven into the fabric of the town. Before Maya could respond, Carla straightened up. Her eyes flicked toward the door. "Careful who you trust," she muttered before walking away. Maya turned slightly, following Carla's gaze. Two men had just entered the diner. They were both in uniform, but they weren't in a rush for coffee. Their eyes scanned the room before settling on Maya. One of them nudged the other, whispering something under his breath. "Back up." Daniels was already moving pieces, making sure Maya knew she was being watched. Maya calmly placed a few bills on the table and grabbed her bag. She didn't want to stay long enough for those officers to strike up a casual conversation. Stepping outside, she felt the weight of their gaze follow her to the door. Sliding into her car, Maya locked the doors and took a steady breath. She needed more information. If Daniels had been shielded for this long, there had to be records, complaints, maybe even evidence that had been buried. And she knew exactly where to start looking. She drove toward the town's public records office. Small towns weren't known for digital security. Paper trails still mattered here. If Daniels had a history of complaints, there might be physical records left behind, or maybe someone in that office was tired of keeping secrets. The office was quiet when she arrived, an old brick building with peeling paint. A single woman sat behind the front desk, flipping through paperwork. "Afternoon. How can I help you?" the woman asked, polite but distracted. "I'm doing some research on local law enforcement history," Maya said smoothly. "Personnel files, public records, that sort of thing." The woman blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, that kind of information is restricted. Unless you're family or have authorization." Maya smiled softly. "Of course, but complaints filed against public officials, those are public record, aren't they?" The woman hesitated. "In some cases, yes, but you'd need to file a formal request." Maya leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. But if Officer Daniels has had complaints, the community deserves to know. Don't they?" The woman's eyes flickered, just for a moment, betraying a flicker of doubt. She leaned in slightly. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered. "But check the archives in the back. Sometimes things get misfiled." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, catching the meaning. She gave a grateful nod and made her way toward the back room. The archives smelled of old paper and dust. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, many unlabeled. Maya began sifting through the cabinets, searching for anything with Daniel's name. Minutes stretched on until finally, she found a thin, yellowing folder tucked behind unrelated files. Inside were complaint forms. 3, maybe 4, all written in shaky handwriting. Words like asterisk excessive force asterisk and asterisk intimidation asterisk jumped off the pages. None were signed by Daniel's superiors. They were marked asterisk resolved asterisk in red ink. One complaint stood out, a statement from a Jason Miller. Her pulse quickened. Jason Miller, Carla's brother. The statement was brief but damning. Jason had accused Daniels of harassing local activists, targeting Black residents, and using threats to silence them. But the file ended abruptly. No follow-up, no investigation. Maya carefully folded the papers back into the folder. She needed to be cautious. This wasn't evidence yet, but it was a lead. As she turned to leave, she froze. A shadow moved across the frosted glass of the office door. Someone was waiting. Maya's breath slowed. Daniels was ahead of her. And now, the game had truly begun. Maya's grip tightened on the folder as the shadow outside the frosted glass loomed larger. Her pulse quickened, and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead suddenly felt deafening in the stillness. Whoever was out there wasn't moving, just standing in silence, watching. She glanced around the archive room. No windows, no back door. One way in, one way out. If it was Daniels or one of his officers, she was boxed in. Slowly, she slid the folder into her bag, careful not to make a sound. Her mind raced for options, but the shadow didn't wait. The doorknob rattled. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Before the door could swing open, she spotted a narrow maintenance closet tucked between 2 filing cabinets. Without hesitation, she slipped inside, pulling the door shut just as the archive door creaked open. Through the thin slats of the closet, she could barely make out the figure stepping in. It wasn't Daniels, but it didn't ease her tension. The man was younger, mid-30s, wearing plain clothes but with the rigid posture of law enforcement. His eyes scanned the room slowly, methodically, like he wasn't in a hurry. "Come on out," he said casually, his voice echoing in the small space. "No need for games. I know you're in here." Maya stayed still, holding her breath. The man moved further in, tapping on the metal filing cabinets as he walked past them. "You think Daniels doesn't know what you're doing? You think you're the first person to dig through these files?" His tone was unsettlingly calm. He wasn't here to scare her. He was here to handle her. Footsteps paused right outside the closet. Silence. Then, the sharp ring of a phone shattered the stillness. The man sighed and answered. "Yeah?" Pause. "She's not here. Maybe she slipped out." Another pause. "Yeah, all right. I'll check the lot." Maya barely exhaled as he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. She waited, counting the seconds in her head. 30, 60, 90. Finally, she eased the closet door open and listened. Nothing. Moving quickly but quietly, Maya slipped out and made her way to the front office. The woman at the desk was gone. A half-finished cup of coffee sat abandoned beside the paperwork. They were clearing the building. Maya stepped into the hallway, keeping her footsteps light. She reached the exit but stopped short. Outside, parked just across the street, was Daniel's cruiser. He was leaning casually against the hood, sunglasses on, staring straight at the building. A slow, knowing smirk spread across his face. He was waiting for her. Maya's mind raced. If she went out the front, it was over. He wanted her to run, to make a mistake. She turned back inside, scanning for another exit. A narrow staircase caught her eye, leading down. Maintenance access, maybe. Without wasting a second, she slipped down the steps. The basement was dark, lit only by a flickering bulb overhead. The air was damp, smelling of old paper and dust. But at the far end of the hall, she spotted a metal door with a rusted emergency exit sign. Maya pushed it open and found herself in a narrow alley behind the building. The street was quiet here. No officers, no Daniels. She didn't run. She walked quickly, blending into the quiet rhythm of the town, circling back toward the diner where she had parked. But as she rounded the corner, her heart dropped. Her car was gone. In its place, the same two officers from the diner stood beside an unmarked sedan. One leaned against the car, flipping through something in his hands. Her keys. Daniels had planned every move. Maya ducked behind a parked truck, her mind spinning. She couldn't outpace them on foot, and without her car, she was cornered. But she wasn't without allies. Her hand moved to her phone. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. It rang twice. "Yeah," a familiar voice answered. "It's Maya. I need a favor. Now." A pause. "How bad is it?" "Bad. Worse than I thought. I'm boxed in. Officer Daniels has people everywhere. I need a way out and I need to expose him." A slow exhale on the other end. "All right, where are you?" "Corner of Main and 5th. They took my car." "I'll be there in 10. Stay hidden." "And Maya?" "What?" "Whatever Daniels is into, it's bigger than just him. Watch your back." The line went dead. Maya pocketed her phone, eyes scanning the street. She didn't have 10 minutes. A loud bang echoed down the street, metal slamming against metal. One of the officers had started checking the trunks of parked cars. They were hunting her now. Maya moved, slipping through a narrow alleyway, weaving behind buildings. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the town. Every corner she turned, she expected to see Daniel's cold, smug stare. But she had something they didn't. The folder in her bag. Proof that Daniels wasn't just a bully with a badge. He was a predator, shielded by a network of corruption that stretched deeper than she could have guessed. And if she could get this evidence out, the whole town would finally see him for what he was. But Daniels wasn't going to let that happen. A distant engine roared to life, tires screeching against the pavement. They knew she was close. Maya pressed herself against a brick wall, closing her eyes for half a second. This was it. No more running. If Daniels wanted to play this game, she was ready. And this time, she wasn't going to play by his rules. Maya pressed her back against the cold brick wall, her mind racing for options. The roar of an engine in the distance sent a jolt through her nerves. They were closing in. She wasn't just being watched anymore. She was being hunted. But something gnawed at her, a small detail she couldn't ignore. Daniels was confident, too confident, as if he already knew her next move. It wasn't just about power, it was strategy. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp buzz of her phone. She yanked it from her pocket, expecting the contact she had called. But it wasn't him. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered, her voice low. "Hello." A distorted voice crackled through the line. "You're not going to make it out unless you listen." Maya's stomach tightened. "Who is this?" "I don't have time to explain. Daniels isn't your only problem. He's not even in charge." "What are you talking about?" A pause. "Then, go to the old mill on the east side. Now, before they find you." The line went dead. Maya stared at the phone, the weight of the voice pressing on her chest. This wasn't some random warning. It felt deliberate, calculated. She didn't trust it, but she couldn't ignore it either. Daniels wasn't in charge. She thought back to the photos in the diner. The mayor's forced smile beside Daniels, the buried complaints. Maybe Daniels was just a weapon, someone else's weapon. But whose? The roar of the cruiser's engine tore her from the thought. She had to move. Maya ducked into another alley, slipping between buildings until the town's outskirts stretched before her. In the distance, she could see the dark silhouette of the old mill. Rusted metal beams jutted into the sky, the windows shattered and hollow. It looked abandoned, but now it felt like the center of everything. She moved fast, weaving through empty lots and back roads, every step echoing in the still air. As she approached the mill, Maya spotted something that made her stop cold. Another car. Not Daniel's cruiser. A black SUV with tinted windows sat parked by the mill's side entrance. Its engine was off, but it felt anything but abandoned. Maya crouched behind a stack of old pallets, studying the scene. The SUV's door opened, and a man stepped out, not a cop. Dressed in a tailored suit, he looked out of place in the crumbling decay of the mill. He spoke into an earpiece, pacing slowly. Maya strained to listen. She's close. Daniels is getting sloppy. If she finds out, this whole operation burns. Operation? Her breath caught. This wasn't just local corruption. This was something bigger. The man paused, listening. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Handle Daniels if you have to. He's expendable." Maya's pulse hammered in her ears. Daniels wasn't in control. He was a pawn. Whatever this operation was, Daniels was just the face of it. And now, even he was a liability. The man in the suit turned, walking toward the mill's entrance. Maya weighed her options. She could turn back and risk running into Daniels' officers, or follow this man and uncover what Daniels was protecting. She moved silently toward the building, slipping inside through a side door left slightly ajar. Inside, the mill was a maze of rusted machinery and dark shadows. The air was thick with dust, every step crunching softly underfoot. She heard voices deeper inside. Moving cautiously, she edged closer, hiding behind a stack of wooden crates. The man in the suit stood with two others, both dressed the same. Between them, a large corkboard was propped up, covered in maps and photographs. Maya's eyes narrowed. Photos of the town, the police department, the mayor's office. And at the center, Daniels. Strings connected him to several other faces, businessmen, city officials, even a judge. But what chilled her was another set of photos. Stacks of cash, shipping containers, drug routes. Daniels wasn't just a corrupt cop abusing power. He was part of a smuggling operation, protected by the very people sworn to uphold the law. One of the men tapped the board. "The next shipment moves tonight. We need Daniels to clear the roadblocks, but he's drawing too much attention." The man in the suit frowned. "If this woman, Maya, keeps digging, we cut Daniels loose and move the product ourselves. No loose ends." Maya's blood ran cold. She wasn't just a threat to Daniels anymore. She was a threat to all of them. A soft creak echoed behind her. She turned slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. Daniels. He stood in the shadows, a gun in hand, eyes colder than before. "Told you to stay out of this," he muttered. But something was different. His hands trembled slightly, his confidence fractured. He had heard everything. "They're going to kill you too, Daniels," Maya said quietly. "You're just another loose end." Daniels' grip on the gun tightened. He glanced toward the men ahead, then back at Maya. "I don't take orders from them," he growled, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. "They've been using you. And now you're disposable." Maya pressed, her voice steady. For a moment, the tension hung thick in the air. Then, Daniels shifted his aim, not at Maya, but toward the men by the board. But it was too late. One of them turned, gun already raised. A deafening gunshot tore through the silence. Daniels stumbled back, gripping his shoulder. Maya didn't wait. She lunged behind cover as bullets ripped through the air. The mill exploded into chaos. Daniels, bleeding, ducked beside her, his face twisted with pain and rage. You want to stop them? Maya hissed. Help me. Daniels gritted his teeth, blood seeping between his fingers. They'll burn this whole town to the ground before they let anyone find out. Maya's eyes were cold. Then we expose them before they get the chance. Outside, engines roared to life. More cars, more men. The noose was tightening. And now, Maya and Daniels, two enemies, had one choice. Bring it all down or be buried with it. Gunfire echoed through the hollow steel walls of the old mill, each shot ricocheting like thunder. Maya pressed herself tighter behind a rusted support beam, the sharp scent of gunpowder filling the air. Daniels crouched beside her, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face pale but hard with resolve. For a moment, they were silent, the reality of their situation settling between them. They were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in the belly of a corrupt beast that had silently ruled the town. They're not going to stop, Daniels muttered, grimacing as he shifted. Even if we make it out of here, they'll cover it up. They'll pin it all on me. Maya stared ahead, watching the shadows move through the dimly lit mill. Then we don't give them the chance. We expose them now. Daniels scoffed bitterly. And how do you plan on doing that? Maya's hand went to the folder in her bag, still miraculously intact. This is bigger than a few crooked cops. They've got records here, shipping routes, bribes, names. If we can get this to someone who can actually do something, it blows everything wide open. Daniels looked at her, weighing his options. His whole life had been about power, control. But now he was just another pawn, and they were ready to discard him. His jaw tightened. There's a radio in my car. Long range. We can use it to send this out. Recordings, documents, everything. But we have to move now. Maya nodded. They didn't have time to argue. Staying low, they moved through the maze of machinery. The sound of boots on concrete echoed in the distance. The men in suits weren't just waiting, they were closing in. They reached a side door, and Daniel slowly pushed it open. Outside, the cool night air hit them like a wave, but it carried another sound. Engines. More black SUVs rolled into the lot. Daniels cursed under his breath. They brought backup. Maya scanned the lot. Your car? Daniels pointed to the far corner where his cruiser sat, partially hidden behind a stack of shipping containers. It's now or never. They sprinted, hugging the shadows. But as they neared the cruiser, the unexpected happened. A figure stepped from behind the containers, blocking their path. The man in the tailored suit. Only now, his face wasn't calm. It was furious. I warned them about you, he sneered, eyes locked on Maya. You just couldn't leave it alone. Daniels raised his gun, but the man didn't flinch. You think this ends with me? This town was bought a long time ago. You kill me, and someone worse takes my place. Maya's breath caught. He wasn't bluffing. But then the man did something unexpected. He raised his hands, holding out a small flash drive. You want the truth? He hissed. It's all here. Every deal, every name, even the ones you never suspected. Daniels hesitated. Why give this to us? A cold smile crept across the man's face. Because I'm not the top, and if I'm going down, I'm taking them with me. Before they could react, a shot rang out from the darkness. The man's eyes widened in shock as blood bloomed on his chest. He collapsed, the flash drive skittering across the pavement. Maya didn't think. She lunged and grabbed it. From the shadows, another figure stepped forward. The mayor, gun in hand. Her polished shoes clicked against the pavement as she approached, face emotionless. I told you this town was built on loyalty, the mayor said softly. You should have listened. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. You? The mayor tilted her head. Who did you think signed your checks, Daniels? Who let you run wild? Maya slowly stood, holding the flash drive tightly. You're not getting away with this. The mayor's smile was thin. Oh, I already have. But you, both of you, you're out of time. She raised her gun. But before she could pull the trigger, headlights exploded through the lot. A battered truck barreled through the fence, skidding to a stop between them. The door flew open. Maya, get in. It was the voice from the phone. Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed Daniels by his uninjured arm and dragged him into the truck. Bullets cracked through the air as the mayor fired, but the truck peeled away, tires screaming. Inside, Maya clutched the flash drive, her mind spinning. Daniels was slumped beside her, groaning in pain. The driver glanced at her, a scar cutting across his jaw. "You got it." Maya nodded. "Good. Then we still have a chance." She turned to him, breathless. "Who are you?" He smirked grimly. "Let's just say I used to work for them, until I didn't." Behind them, the mill erupted in flames. The mayor wasn't taking chances. She was erasing everything. But Maya had what she needed. The flash drive, the folder. Proof that the rot ran deeper than anyone knew. But as they sped into the dark, a final thought gnawed at her. If the man in the suit wasn't the top, then who was? And how far would they go to silence her next?